Good evening, everyone. This is Kaleem Joy, licensed midwife, certified professional midwife, and certified pediatric massage therapist. I'm having a great time visiting with family. We're at the hot springs in Arkansas right now, and it's been really amazing going up and down the trails and feeling the wonderful hot water. I wish that we had something local in my hometown of Sacramento to be able to enjoy. I'm hoping that lots of people will join us tonight. We've gone to doing the lives twice a week in the hopes that that makes it easier for most of you at 6:30. Love any comments if you'd like to hear more or certain topics, or if you'd like to have a different time. So my topic tonight is birth, a timeless experience. So, I was pondering about this. And, as this is Natural Childbirth 101, it's talking about natural. What is natural? And how did we get to the definition that we have of natural? So when we think back, hey Jennifer, when we think back to the beginning of time, whatever that is and whatever your belief systems are, there was the beginning and a person was born. So someone went through pregnancy, and then they went through labor and birth and were born, and then they likely went through breastfeeding and then parenting and raising their child. So when we look at how pregnancy occurs, we know that once a baby is conceived and is in the womb and is growing, that womb becomes their home. And this home that goes on in there, allows them to develop all of their beautiful organs, their brain, their kidneys, their heart, their lungs, and become a little human being in there, in their own little world and ecosystem of water and love and warmth. And that's their world. That's all that they know, is what's going on inside that beautiful womb. And as they're in there growing, we know that at some point in time they're going to need to come out, because obviously they can't stay in there. But as they grow and they're early on, we think of a baby, when they're early on, say anytime, before 37 weeks, if they come out, they're not really ready. And when we talked about the peaches and all of that, it was looking at, making sure that they're ready to come out. Well, let's say that we look at a baby and they're early on, they're 26 weeks, they're 32 weeks, they're 34 weeks. Their little bodies are in this beautiful ecosystem, growing and maturing and doing everything that they're supposed to do. And the baby has made a great placenta and a great cord so that they can connect with their birth giver, their mom, and be able to get everything that they need and give back things they don't need. And this wonderful person is going to take care of nurturing, nourishing, and loving them. And at some point in time, there has to be this ability within us to bring them from inside the womb to the outside world. So when we think about this and we go back in time and we think all of us are here because way back in time there were babies that grew inside this wonderful womb home, and there was a time when the baby said, "I'm ready now, and I'm ready to meet the outside world. It's a big place, and it's very different from the world I've been living in, but I know that I can't stay in here for much longer because it's time for me to grow in the outside world." And so they trigger this wonderful dance of hormones, and the birth giver, the mother, triggers, and this orchestra begins to play that has been sort of warming up for time. And nature, by its very sense of how it occurs, has created the ability, and this is regardless of your belief systems. Rather you believe in evolution, whether you don't believe in evolution or creation, whether you believe in creation and God, the greater good. It doesn't matter what your belief is. It all comes down to the fact that we as a human species grow our babies inside our wombs, and at some point in time, preferably after 37 weeks, they get a signal from one another that says it's time for me to come from inside the womb to outside the womb and to now live on the outside world. And when we think about this, that it started way back in time where we didn't have all the technology, all the tools, all the cesareans or anything like that. Now, some may say yes, but not all babies or mothers survived. And I can say that, that we understand that, that modern medicine is helping us with that in many ways. But if we go back and look also, we also know our nutrition was simpler than it is today. We had fruits and vegetables and meats and basically breads, and they all came from the farms. But we also know that during time, people started wearing corsets. So when they wore corsets, they began to change how the shape of their pelvis and their waist and their ribs were. So when we begin to go from time forward, we say, how did things begin to become difficult? Because in the beginning of time, or throughout those years, when somebody needed to give birth, they did. And not all of that was around. And rather they called a midwife, which most of the time that's what it was. Eventually there were doctors that were doctors of the village or of townships that took care of everything, including being there at birth. The birth was happening. Pregnancy worked. I mean, birth givers and women are growing babies all the time. And we don't use technology to make sure that that growth is occurring inside the womb. So bringing it forward and understanding that before technology existed, birth was already working, even if no one was there, right? I mean, doesn't that make sense to you? That labor and birth, labor is going to get triggered, and the birth is going to happen even if no one was there. So how did we get to having to use a bunch of technology? So if we go back to the corset, it changed how the shape of the pelvis worked, which meant that birth givers and women were having difficulty at times being able to get their babies born because of a change in shape. And those corsets were put on from the time that they were teens, so they kind of grew that way. We have a much more relaxed pelvis and physical structure now with the way that we dress and what we do, sometimes too lax because we sit too much in life instead of being out and working in the garden and that. Some people are very active, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's easier, right? So we go through time even a little bit more from the corsets, and we go forward into what then changed. Medications. So we ended up starting to bring medications into birth, and during that time, it began to change what the normal occurrence and the normal way that our bodies utilized our hormones, because now we have something that's different, something that's causing a change in how the body can work chemically. So we had a physical change, then we saw a chemical change, and during that time we began to see the emotional change from this is what we do, and we have our babies, and babies come out and we're tended to by the women of our village and the families who would bring food, and they would make sure we rested. And why? Well, to make sure that people did well. We also came through the Great Depression, and the Great Depression caused malnutrition in women. And that malnutrition caused higher levels of bleeding, babies coming too early, babies who didn't make it. So we have a historical reason why things began to occur. And as we move up in time and drugs became part of it and hospitals around the world wars, then birth started going into a hospital and more technology became desired in some women. They wanted to have twilight sleep instead of being awake, so they asked for that, and it was offered to them. We had nitrous oxide, which was an anti-anxiety, and that was utilized. And gradually things began to move because of concerns over families and over women when technology was used, of rather they and the baby were safe. And when women were put out, such as when I was born, that also put the baby out. And so the baby was not as awake and alert and able to breathe as well, and needed a lot more attention and support in those early hours until their body metabolized off all of the medications and their parent metabolized off and they were able to reconnect. And also breastfeeding was not part of that story back in my day. So what's happened since then? Little by little, women, birth givers, have become wanting to be awake, which Lamaze started being able to have that, how do I learn how to be in birth? So we went from being very instinctual to now having to be taught and reminded about what our body already knew how to do. And during that time, more and more women said, I don't want to be asleep. I don't want forceps. I don't want to be cut or given an episiotomy. I want my baby to be left with me, and I want to breastfeed. And so it was really the desire in birth givers and women to have their births back that started that journey into what we have now in hospitals, where we have labor, delivery, recovery rooms, which is huge compared to what we had 30 years ago, which women went into an operating room, their babies went away from them, they were put in incubators, and they weren't allowed out except every 4 hours to be fed primarily by bottle. And so that was a sabotage to breastfeeding. We have babies who stay in the rooms. These are wonderful. We had home birth back then. Home birth has come forward. Birth centers are more abundant now. So it's kind of someplace in between that home birth and that hospital. So you have all of your choices available to you, but understand how we got here. And of course, there's a much bigger story to that. You can look up the stories. It's fascinating to look up how did we get to having birth stools and how that all occurred. There's actually several of them in the Smithsonian over the course of history, and that's a fabulous history of how we came to have birth stools. So my giving to you tonight is to say, remember that pregnancy goes on every day without anybody outside of you helping with that. Now, I understand that sometimes there are situations where a woman may need to be hospitalized in order to keep her baby in, or that babies come early, and we have great NICU units that help babies to grow and progress until they can go home. These are situations that should be out of the norm. They should be the exceptions. So I'm talking specifically about the exceptions. Hey, Jen. And being able to go forward in time and reclaim what was there centuries ago, which is you. You grow a healthy baby, and your body and your baby know exactly how to signal each other and how to be born. And as we go through the 40 days, excuse me, as we start to release them in the coming weeks, and I go through giving these lives and telling you more and more about how you can take more control during your pregnancy to maximize your birth and postpartum and your breastfeeding and your baby. And the biggest key is that you have to remember that you are the person that is not only responsible, but that are the empowered person. We've had it all the way along in history, from the beginning to the end. So I've been excited about sharing this one. It's been on my mind. And just to bring that perspective to you. And I hope if you didn't get to watch all of this that you'll go back and watch it, because there's some great information in it, at least I think so. And I'm going to pop on over to Instagram. I'm going to go through the same thing, and I really want to thank you for watching tonight. And as always, go in, hug your kids, tell them you love them, tell them they're amazing, and remind them that they can do anything that they set their mind to. So I'll see you again probably in a few days. As I said, I'm in Arkansas, in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and we're having a great time with family. All right, bye for now.